How often do you travel between China and America? Are you formally living in China right now?
So I formally live in China, so I live in America and China, dividing my time approximately every 4 to 6 months in each location. Basically, I'm in China and I come to America every 4 to 6 months because of my visa status, and then I return back to China for work.
That's really, really cool. What are the educational requirements for your position?
So for teaching in China, I consciously made a decision to go back to school to get a graduate degree, because at the time I was told that if you had a master's degree, you did not need a teaching certificate to teach overseas. And because I love to travel, I used my graduate degree as a way of traveling so that I could explore other cultures. But because you need to make money while you're doing that, I decided to use my business experience and teach. So that is how I ended up going to China with my graduate degree and ended up teaching at a Chinese university.
Do you plan on continuing to work in China?
I've sort of aged out now because they have an age requirement. So what I'm going to do is focus more on the business side, the entrepreneurial side, the exporting and importing of products from China into America, and also tourism. Now that I've been in China for 4 years, to introduce Chinese culture to my friends and colleagues in America and hopefully bring them to experience it for themselves in China.
I'm sure a lot of viewers think that's really, really interesting.
I think it's a fascinating life and I'm enjoying it and having a great time.
What interests and skills are best suited for your job as an educator and also an entrepreneur?
As an educator and as an individual, my skills, you have to have a passion for lifelong learning. In other words, for me, it's not important to get a degree. It's important to want to continue to learn something new throughout your entire life. So as a young person, someone who's in the 7th or 8th grade, 9th grade, you want to develop a passion for reading, because reading opens the door to all types of cultures and other people, and it may interest you in different ways as long as you're reading about different subjects. So I strongly encourage the aspect of reading in one's life in terms of what I'm attempting to do.
From the perspective of an entrepreneur, what types of personality traits are best for that field of work?
Well, I have a theme on my blog page that says, think locally but act globally. No, I'm sorry, think globally but act locally. So the world is a small place now, and we must use our life experience not just to help our communities locally, but also think about how that impacts the global world that we live in, because we're increasingly becoming one world community.
When you were in school, what were your favorite subjects?
I enjoyed history probably the most, because if you learn the history of a person or people, you get to understand why that person or people, their culture is where it is today. And if you understand where they are today, it gives you a window in what they could be like tomorrow. So history was always one of my favorite subjects.
Absolutely. What do you do in your typical workday?
My typical workday is engaged in a lot of, when I'm teaching, is of course developing lesson plans for my students, thinking of new and innovative ways to interest them in the subject of business, and just planning out my daily or weekly schedule for the best interest of my students. If I'm on the business side, I'm looking at potential products, investigating new products that could be brought into the marketplace, and how I might be able to interest people based on their needs in buying those products.
What do you like most about your job?
I like, number one, meeting new people and learning new cultures. Based on history, I really enjoy seeing how other people live and how we can interact with each other to make our respective lives better.
Mr. Muhammad, please tell us some surprising facts about your job.
Surprising facts. Well, in order for me to live in China, as I said, I've been here 4 years. One of the biggest challenges that I had was learning the language. Chinese is not an easy language to learn. However, because I wanted to learn more about the culture and the people, when I live in China, I don't live in one of the major cities like Shanghai, Beijing, or Hong Kong. I live in what is called a second-tier city, where no one speaks English. So I had to learn some Chinese language, some Mandarin, if I wanted to eat. And eating was very important to me. And so I had to learn some words and some phrases of different foods. So if I went out to eat, or if I went to the market to buy food, I could speak the language and order the types of food that I wanted. That was a very challenging aspect, but it was very important if I was going to stay in China.
Would you be comfortable with sharing a couple of foods that you know how to say?
Well, yes. Cheza is eggplant, Jiro is chicken, Juro is pork, and I can tell people, Wo Kuisho Idian Potonkwa, which means I speak Chinese a little.
Wow, that's so cool. I hope some of that intelligence rubs off on me. What are the most useful websites in professional societies related to your work?
So if you have access to Google, which most people do now, which by the way you don't have access to Google in China, but here in the West and in America, having access to Google, I strongly recommend anyone interested in traveling to just go on Google and look for volunteer opportunities in China, volunteer opportunities in Africa, volunteer opportunities in South America. And you'll be surprised at the number of nonprofit organizations that are looking for young people to volunteer their time, and many of them will pay you in order to come for 2 weeks, maybe even a month, to work in these various countries on a volunteer basis, or they'll pay you a small stipend, and you get to experience, number one, the travel, you get to experience meeting new people, and you absolutely get to experience learning new cultures. So just Google volunteer opportunities and wherever it is you want to go, and I'm sure you'll find many websites that you could, do research on.
Is it affordable?
Traveling? I think it's very affordable if you volunteer for it. I got started in traveling by my mentor some over 20 years ago because I volunteered to work in Africa. And because I volunteered to work in Africa bringing medical and educational supplies primarily to the Liberian refugee camp in Ghana, I was able to travel back and forth as a volunteer. I didn't pay any money. People paid me to come to help them do that type of work. So it's very affordable until you reach a point where you have enough money where you could do it on your own.
Wow, that is awesome. I just want to say thank you for volunteering in all these countries. I think the world needs a lot more people like you, and I just want to thank you for having me here to interview you. Thank you so much.